by the way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another movie review over here on MN Vikings Zombies social media, I guess I should say. We're over on Twitch and YouTube live to discuss the Netflix movie Blood Red Sky, which was a 2021 film from, I don't have that window open, so let's open that one, from director Peter Thorsworth. And the description of the movie is that it's an action horror thriller, and it's about a woman with a mysterious illness forced into action when terrorists attempt to hijack a transatlantic overnight flight. I have Kyle Smith here with me to discuss this one. How's it going, Kyle?
Going great, man. Watched it today, lazy Sunday, and yeah, this is a cool movie. Probably the most awful situation I could think to be in, minus the plane being on fire. But yeah, this is an interesting movie. I was only surprised.
Now, the interesting part about this that wasn't revealed in the trailer notes or the description or anything is that the condition that she's dealing with is that she's a vampire.
Right. And I thought as this movie went on, there will be an obscure reference later, but when you take a vampire and of a vampire in the movies in the past, they're usually aggressive. They're predators, but in this one, there's a lot of human compassion and components there that I think is probably the big foundation of this movie for me of why I enjoyed it, because you see the internal struggle with her being a mom and caring for a kid, but also trying to fight off this sickness that she has.
Well, one of the major problems that I have with vampire movies in general is, like you said, they go too far one way or the other. They're either bloodthirsty, mindless maniacs, or they're compassionate, sparkling, wonderful people.
Right.
And this one, you got a bit of that back and forth. And there were some nice messages kind of laid in there about prejudice and judging people before you really know them.
Yes.
And I really felt like this was kind of a strong movie on several different levels for that reason, is that they did try to include a few little messages like horror movies tend to do. And we've had that discussion a few times on here now, is that horror movies can sometimes take a hold of the story and insert small pieces of American or even worldwide human cultures and make you look at them a little differently. And this one hit that button with not only assuming that the mom was a bad guy, a lot of the people on the plane, but also assuming who the terrorists were on the plane and everything like that. So, yeah, I mean, it was a bit of an eye-opening film. It was a little bit better than I thought it was going to be going in, because I was expecting your generic, vamps on a plane movie once I realized that it was vampires. But let's talk about that. In the one scene that really got to me right away is they did all the setup real nice. They showed a lot of the backstory about getting on the plane and at the airport, and the ball is the globe, which I thought that was all really cool. And then the scene comes where the boy wants to go hide, and the mom tries to run off and protect her and gets caught by the hijackers. Now, I don't know if you're like me, Mr. Smith, but my first thought was they'd just shoot her.
Yeah.
And they did. That usually doesn't happen in movies.
Especially with the group of the terrorists in this movie. You see, what I really like is, like, I don't know if I call it the human element. I'm not trying to make a pun there because there's a vampire story, but the human element of emotion and compassion, that even amongst the group of terrorists, you had good guys and bad guys. The guy that had his suit half on most of the time, the big jack guy with the tattoo, he seemed pretty compassionate for an a-hole in the movie. And then you had the lead guy who was just ruthless to everyone. I see that a little bit.
We got to talk about that guy's performance, because that was great. He played a bad guy really well.
I hated him from the moment he stepped in, and he played that part to a T, and I loved it.
It was beautiful.
Talking about the scene where the mother is shot, and she's very ill. I love the backstory of it was kind of random, but it worked, of how it came to be. Her husband and her with the new baby, which you see um, early in the film, they get stranded and it's snowing outside. He tries to go for help and ends up getting abducted and killed. And that's how she became a vampire, which is out in the woods. It's very isolated. Typical. I'm starting to see this a lot too. Is what's it? 28 days later, they're isolated. It's very cold.
Yeah.
It's don't visit Alaska or Russia. Is what I'm collected from all these films. Wherever it's really cold, don't go there. As vampires. But yeah, there's a lot of good compassion in this story too. And like we were saying when we started, I feel empathy for the character, the main character, the mother. You see that she's trying to contain something that must be very hard to contain.
Right.
But I thought it was really cool throughout how she could pull out the evil parts of herself if she needed to. And it started with one of the most terrible situations. If you guys know me from the Purple People podcast or anywhere, I'm a huge dog lover. And she had to kill a dog to get this going. And I was very torn about that. It got me in my emotions very quick.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a theme for me because I'm watching another movie on Netflix right now, or a series, I should say, and there's a little bit of animal harm in it, and that's hard to watch. It really is. And if you're a fan of The Walking Dead, like I am, horses don't really have a chance. So if you see a horse, don't get too attached.
Yeah, it was crazy. I guess my mind still stays so innocent for these movies. Like, all right, what's going to happen? She's crawling around in the cargo area, and I was like, why'd she open the little dog's cage? And once it hit me, I was like, oh no, that is not going to last. But realizing what the greater good was, you're like, okay, cool. Please go attack these terrorists and get this plane down. But like I mentioned when we started, this is probably a disaster scenario that you never want to be a part of. It's bad enough when you've got to worry about terrorists taking over that you feel pretty scared and, everything's all over the place and jumbled and you're worried about your safety. And then you have to worry later when she pops up, you're like, oh my God, what is this mutant thing? I don't know what it is. That was pretty much the worst case scenario for all those passengers on the plane who eventually turned into vampires, which was nuts.
One of the things that really got to me too about this film was that it was built like they designed this movie to be a slow movie. Mm-hmm. It doesn't move fast. It doesn't skip past a lot of things. A lot of time is just spent in that plane. Yet, if you get past the initial, very beginning when they were introducing all the characters and trying to establish people, once you get past that, which is necessary in any horror film to create a connection, the slow pacing didn't bother me at all anymore.
Nope.
And that's a sign of a movie that can really build a great situation that can draw people in and somehow make it rewarding. And although I do have a little bit of questions regarding the logistics of the end of this movie, I will say that the way they built that whole situation up for that payoff was well worth it.
Yeah, when you were referencing the slow build, I started thinking what movies skip a lot or have a lot of things compact in one. I think of the Marvel series and think about the Avengers. It's just an up and down of action and then more plot and detail action. And then this, it's just a gradual climb, which you said. The only thing that I really, and I'm nitpicking here, so please, for anyone who watches this, don't think that I'm coming out. I have to find something negative. With films that deal with anything overseas, I see a lot of voiceover that's very obvious. The poor boy that was in there obviously spoke a different language. They had to voice over that for the American audience. But
I believe this was a German film, right?
I think so, yes. And I have to look here. I have the IMDb up, see if they'll give us some hints. And I'll look around later when you're putting in your opinions here. But yeah, that's pretty much my only, I don't even say a complaint, just the thing that I noticed. It built. I really became attached to the mom and the young boy, as most people will in this movie. And then you choose sides, and you get dragged into that ebb and flow of, oh my gosh, what's happening? What I liked about the mother's character was she starts out here. You see, she has no hair. You're thinking, oh, this probably has cancer. Let's talk to the doctor. Didn't realize it at first, and then eventually, once she gets into vampire mode, she pretty much never leaves. So her character also goes with that climb. And at the end, you're starting to feel bad for a character that normally in any other movie, and this specific kind of character, you probably wouldn't feel compassion for. But I felt a lot of compassion for her.
Yeah, I made a quick look, and yeah, this was a German movie. It box officed about $401,000 before it hit Netflix. So it had a nice little run in Germany before it got picked up by a streaming service. And honestly, I really thought that the way they did the prosthetics for the turn was really cool. The wig that came off, and the more I think about the transitions that the main actress had to make between watching after her boy and just the absolute rage that she felt in some places, the range of acting she had to endure to do this film is pretty amazing. And that's Perry Baumeister as Nadja, and she knocked it out of the park as well. I do have to say the casting of this film really did a great job. And now that I'm looking at the poster for the film, I realize that outside the window of the plane on the movie poster, it's her hugging the boy, and there's a vampire out on the.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that before.
I was looking at that while you were talking just now, and I was like, that's actually a pretty cool poster. And yeah, I agree with you 100%. The casting here is very good. The people that you love pretty quickly and deeply as far as movie characters go. You have the sub characters like Kai Seti, who was Farid. He's a good supporting character. You're like, oh man, I really feel attached to this guy, because let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way, man. So it looks to be maybe German or Russian terrorists taking over. I don't remember, and I'm sorry. I'm still at a whirlwind of it. It's a minor detail. Terrorist organization trying to crash the stock market, and they're trying to plot it on two Arabic, Middle Eastern looking guys, Muslims in particular, and try to say, hey, we're having another kind of 9/11 thing going on, and try to blame it on them while they escape below using parachutes or whatever. And I thought that was clever, even though it's a terrible thing to happen. It's like, okay, it seems semi-believable. But I really love the supporting characters too. I felt, like I said before, I felt connected to the one terrorist who was like trying to be reasonable and be like, hey, don't pick on kids, don't do this. He eventually, succumbed to the vampire here, but I feel a lot of empathy there. But this rounds out the point you made. The casting here is great. The guy who played the villain 8-Ball, Alexander Shear, goodness, man. That guy was incredible. And I really like the leader here. I think his name was Berg. Yeah, Dominic Purcell. I'm reading the names now. The leader of all the terrorists. I really think they really said that. I like this movie a lot, man. I was very pleasantly surprised. And I won't say that I'm not into this genre of horror. I just haven't seen enough to be familiar with. But this turned out to be pretty good.
I want to talk about another scene in this movie that kind of got to me a little bit. They were two passengers. Well, a passenger took over the cockpit to try to steer the plane. And in an effort to try to get them to get the door open, they executed a passenger right in front of the door and had her watch the peephole, Then they said, we can do this all day. And they went back, and you thought they were going to grab this guy that was interrupting him kind of in the aisle a little bit. And instead, that guy kept walking and grabbed a little girl.
Oh, yeah. Brutal.
Now, my first thought was, well, I already saw the woman get shot, so maybe they're actually going to shoot this little girl. But the human side came out again in the mom, and she jumped out there to save the little girl, and it was a really nice scene. It was a nice combination of compassion and action that you don't see in a lot of films, and to see what was supposed to be a villain, the vampires are supposed to be the bad guys, but to see the villain jump out there to save the little girl, I don't know. To me, that was a nice little heartwarming scene.
Right, and to your point, that could be, they could have went multiple directions with this movie, and it could have just been a lot of gore and a lot of blood, which there is. Yeah. If you're into good vampire bites and unique kills, there's a couple good ones in here. But yeah, that little moment sprinkled in there was really good, and we're just going to keep reiterating the point. This is the stuff that makes you want to root for the main character here. So,
and you complimented the other actor that played a terrorist, and if you saw his face when that blonde lead terrorist brought up that little girl, you kind of understood where you were coming from there. He didn't want to do that.
Yeah, it's
You
always
can tell.
funny. I think that's a good thing we've seen growing up. Seeing you're trying to. There's a handful of movies you can think of off the top of your head where you like kind of feel for the bad guy a little bit, and you're like, look, I know we're doing something that's not ideal. We're just trying to. You could tell he was clearly in it just for the money. He even made a point when the first of his friends got attacked by the vampire in this movie. The main character here, I'm gonna get her name down, Naja. Yeah, when he one of his buddies succumbs to Naja in the cargo area, he goes, first thing he says is like, well, who's getting his cut? Like, he doesn't care about hurting people. He just wants to get paid. So I like that. You could see it's those little moments you're talking about now. They're all flooding back to me of why would you pick her of everything? Hey, you're really sadistic. Even the leader of the terrorists has said that once. He's like, look, you're a psychopath. You got to calm down. Do this again, I'm gonna have to kill you myself. Yeah, it just took over, man. And shout out to 8 Ball. This guy, you could see it was pretty brilliant, man. The way he took over the air marshal, and they were probably just gonna gun tap him, knock him out, tie him up or something, and he just goes ballistic. Probably one of the best kills in the movie. Just stabs a guy to death, and you're like, well, that seems a bit much. And everybody there is just like, what are you doing? Like, I can't. This is not what we planned on. We agreed not to do this. So once he walks out and his air crew member student stage just spraying blood everywhere and talking to everyone normal, I thought that was absolutely brilliant. One of the core parts of the movie.
Well, it wasn't a mistake-free movie. Like I said at the end, there were a couple of confusing parts. Like, how do you handcuff a guy who got his hand chopped off?
How do you do what?
How do you handcuff a guy who got his hand chopped off?
Yeah. You noticed that. I noticed that if you had, and this is me nitpicking again, but when her son here, Elias, shoots the gun, and it busts out an entire airplane window. That's not how that works. Those windows are super thick. Probably he's going to get lodged. It's not going to suck over, and it's definitely not going to pull a full person there. I was like, okay, that's cool for dramatic effect. That works. But yeah, how do you handcuff a guy who's got his hand hacked off and it's in a sling? I'm not really sure. I think you just take his one full hand and you kind of just attach it to his waist. That's what I would do. But that was funny.
Yeah, that part was kind of weird. I kind of wondered all about that one a little bit, but as a whole, this was a really cool movie with some really cool scenes. The car with the bulletproof glass. Let's talk about that scene for a minute.
Interesting.
She wanted to get at the blonde bad guy who we all hated, and she was shooting at the windows, and she grabbed a metal rod off one of the cat carriers or dog carriers and used it to jam it through the glass and where the bullet hole had hit, and then from there things got a little even more wily, didn't it?
Yeah, that was pretty wicked. Oh, we won't call it a kill because it didn't kill anyone, but that was a pretty wicked kill attempt.
Yeah, she poured gasoline through the bullet hole and then lit a match and threw it in the bullet hole, and that was quite crazy, especially when his crew came up to him in the car and realized that he was still alive, and the reason he was still alive is because he injected himself and made himself turn. Now, this is when the people taking over the flight started to turn, and it got ugly at that point. That's when the action really started ramping up.
Yeah, and you know what? Knowing that you're a zombie fan, if you guys didn't know that already, it's in Adam's screen name.
It's true.
That you're a zombie fan, having that element of turning, I thought that would appeal to you pretty well. And like you said, it's going to snowball very fast. I'm not sure. I might have been texting or something, but I know the guy, the jerk who was trying to holler at and cop a feel of the flight attendant in first class. He got bit on his stomach, and I didn't see who did that. But it reminded me of that same movie. Was it 28 Days Later? Josh Hartnett back in the day. You have the one crazy guy that wants to get bitten by the vampires, and he wants to turn, and he begs the guy. He's like, please, just bite me. I don't want to suffer, blah, blah. And it's always the guy that wants to turn that they never want anything to do with. That's the funniest part to me. You saw that right after this scene. 8 Ball gets locked in the car, lit on fire. You think he's dead. He's not. His compadres come down, open it up, and he starts to go at them. And it's a war path from there. And with everybody on the plane that is just potentially prey at this point, that snowballed out of control pretty quickly once everybody started turning. So that was a crazy point in the movie too.
Yeah, all the passengers banging at the door of the cockpit trying to get in. And Nadia, of course, entertained it because she doesn't want these people to die.
Right.
But at that point, you can't open the door.
Mm-mm.
And you know that you're leaving everyone out there to be feasted on. That had to be extremely hard, especially after she already risked her own life to save that little girl and to fight the hijackers when they're walking up and down the aisles. And, of course, the epic fight that she had down below with some of the others. And it's heartbreaking that she had to choose to stay on the plane and fight in order to save the boy, which, of course, is definitely her priority.
Yeah, this one had close encounters. And you got to think, too, all the while, all these fights we're talking about is happening while a plane is thousands of feet above pretty much the Atlantic Ocean at this point. They did a couple of turnarounds, so they ended up coming back. It sounded like the commander here, let's see, Colonel Alan Drummond, it sounded like they were maybe Irish, Scottish, or something like that. I didn't see exactly where. I know it said Royal Airfield somewhere, but they landed at a Royal Airfield strip and were surrounded by the military there. So, yeah, all that was happening while a plane is in the air, which is super terrifying because you're not gonna live and survive a plane crash of any kind. So that I thought that added element was pretty crazy. Talking about when the plane actually landed, I thought it was interesting how it started and then it took you back. I always like movies that do that. The plane lands, you see a guy in the cockpit and you're like, what the heck's going on? What's wrong with his hand? I noticed that. They're like, if you do anything crazy or sudden, we're going to shoot you. I was like, okay, this is, terrorist hijacking moment. Of course you're going to think that.
Right.
But that poor guy Fareed has to sit in the cockpit the whole time knowing that there's pretty much like metaphorically here, not actually, but like a lion outside the door just waiting to pounce on him. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, he's got vampires locked in the plane behind him, and he's got guns pointed at him from the front, and everybody's assuming that he's either a terrorist or he's vampire food, which we got to talk about that for a second too, because when you SOS for help, how do you explain that situation?
You took the words right out of my mouth. You took it right out of my mouth. The child, Elijah, he was telling once he got off, he was the first one off, dropped himself down. He's got this blank stare. What is the kid's name in real life here? Carl Anton Coe. I mean, goodness. What some good acting from him as well, because he seems to be like less than 10 years old, but just that blank stare out into the abyss was really, really good. But he's trying to tell those guys once he comes to and snaps out of it. He's like, hey, there's vampires. My mom's there, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, all right, he's in shock. Obviously, he's in shock. So they sedate him. And you feel terrible for him because you're like, well, you should have listened to the kid. And then you've got a guy with his hand missing and all these other things. He's like, there are vampires on there. And everybody's like, okay, sure there are. And
where's the other pilot? He's dead. What happened?
It just drew you in closer to feel for these characters because a lot of them, 90% of these characters in this movie, they're all innocent people. So I really like that point of it too. It really drew me in. Even though I hated that it was happening, I was like, okay, this is making me more invested.
Yeah, so let's talk about how this compares to some of the other movies we've watched or the horror movies that we've watched over the course of our lives. Would you recommend this movie to a friend?
I would. I'd have to have more of a specific friend group or certain friends to suggest this to. I don't think everyone is going to be open to the idea of this movie. I could see some of my really ignorant, hard to please friends saying, oh, it's snakes on a plane with vampires. How cool. Like if you wanted to give that kind, but if you just come in with an open mind and really let them tell the story and let it take over. I had no idea about this. You and I had agreed on this movie maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and I'd forgotten about the plot, and I went into it just blank. And
Right.
coming out of it now, yeah, absolutely, I would recommend this to people.
Yeah, I think I would too. If I had friends who enjoyed horror movies and didn't mind something a little bit on the gorier side, and of course, if you know that they're into vampires, that's a big plus because this does insert itself right into the Nosferatu vampire lore very well with the way that they portrayed vampires. And honestly, I was pretty impressed. I can see why Netflix wanted to option this film, why they went out and got it for the streaming service, and why they did advertise it a little bit heavier when it was initially released, because it is quite a good film. It's cast extremely well. The acting was done very well. I believe a lot of the acting was either done on a stationary plane or behind a green screen, which was fantastically done. So yeah, I mean, as far as production and everything, I've got to hand it to this film, because for what it was able to accomplish with what it had, as far as I know, this movie didn't have a ton of bigger name actors in it, because I don't watch a ton of German horror movies. I usually stick to like French or Japanese, but I feel kind of bad because so far I've picked a couple of international films for you, and the dubs have gotten you.
Like I said, that's just me nitpicking. We're so spoiled here in America that we have American actors and actresses, and they have, like you said, it's a good point. They have access to all these studios and all the CGI and green screen stuff. Like, I really like that you pointed that out. For them to use what they used here with probably a limited budget, I think it exceeded expectations. It's one of these films. If I had to label it as one word, I'd call this film underrated. It's not going to blow you out of the water like best horror movie I've ever seen, but with the combination of how I was invested in the characters and the little dynamics of the story, especially with the main character having this internal battle of trying to be a mom, she's pretty much trying to hide her own identity, which was a cool little thing in itself, was watching her deal with that. And then she just finally has to say, I have to let this take over. This is probably going to be the end of me, but I've got to protect my child. I like this a lot. I was very, very pleased with this. If I'm complaining about the dub, and that's the only thing I'm complaining about, and that's the only complaint I have for this movie,
pretty darn good.
I'm set with this one.
And if you aren't really into dubs, and the voices will bother you, I will say that this movie, unlike some of the other movies that we've watched, the voices they chose for dubs aren't extremely annoying. They won't take you totally out of the film. It's just the words aren't really matching up with the mouths at the right times for some of the dialogue, and that might throw you off a little bit. But as a whole, I felt they did a great job choosing the voices as well. I watched one movie where they picked the worst voice ever for a kid. Like, the kid was 12 years old. I think they picked like a 4-year-old, 5-year-old voice.
Oh no.
And it just did not match up whatsoever. And I felt they did a much better job on this one. So that's about all I had to really talk about this. There were some scenes that I felt were a little shocking, but it wasn't put in there. I didn't feel to be an excessive shock movie. So that felt really good. I love the slow build. I liked how the characters were developed. And honestly, like you've been saying, any criticism I have of this film is a nitpick.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a good point too. There wasn't a lot of what was the one, a classic horror story we did last? It was all right. It's kind of all over the place. This was kind of the opposite. They had stuff in there for shock value in that film. They had things just randomly placed. This was very tastefully done. Everything seemed like it was predetermined, or there was a purpose. Purpose is the word I'm looking for. Everything had a purpose in this movie, and the way that it came together was very, very good. I was very pleasantly surprised, as I've said a lot today, but
whoever put the script together and did the screenplay, they made a tight film that, although it, like I had said earlier, it's a slow build. It can be a little annoying if you might find yourself looking at your phone through the beginning of the movie. You might. But that's, like I said before, with horror movies, you need that time to develop characters and assess the situation and get people comfortable to what's going on. And yeah, sometimes that can drag on just a little bit. And I felt this one, although it did what it needed to do, it might have taken a little bit too long. That's the only issue I had at the beginning. But to see all the scenes with flashing back to fighting the vampires in the what was that, like a little cave house?
Yeah,
when
that
she
was
went
very
into the snow.
yeah, that was very, very weird. Starting to be in these people, and there's a house with underground tunnels and trapdoors and stuff, which is, yeah, it is what it is. That's gonna be in there, but yeah, I guess it's just the vampire house.
Yeah. And that's where she kind of learned about who she had become and what the threat is. And I don't know how she found a doctor to help her, but that's awesome.
Yeah, that was a question that I had too. Did she really know that? Did the doctor really know that that's what they were treating? Obviously not, but I would like to have learned what she kind of masked it as. That would have been cool.
Yeah, of course there are always going to be those questions about movies like this, but as a whole, yeah, I was quite impressed. I was very happy, and I'm excited to watch whatever we watch next and see what we think of that, because so far we're hitting pretty good. The 3 Fear Street movies were pretty good. This one's pretty good. We split a little bit on the previous movie, but yeah, I mean, as a whole, Netflix is doing all right.
Yeah, Netflix is doing well. I'm excited to see whatever else. If I had to give a number, we've kind of done that in recent ones before. I'd give this about a 7.5 out of 10. A little room for improvement. It's cool, and a way that I was thinking throughout this whole movie review that we've been doing is, people can do a spinoff on pretty much anything. Some of it has no purpose, no direction. But if they really wanted to continue and do a part 2, because it kind of left a little cliffhanger at the end, they could absolutely go forward with this. Could do that. I'm not sure that I would want it, but I know they could. I'd probably check it out. But yeah, overall, I'd give it like 7.5. I was very pleased, and it's an underrated horror flick for sure.
Yeah, like you said, I'll be a little bit more generous and I'll go an 8, because there were only a couple things I have to nitpick about that. The handcuff scene and then killing them with the fire and the explosion. I mean, she killed the one vampire that was fighting her with fire, and then she set the guy on fire in the car, and that one didn't kill him. So I'm trying to see the consistency there, because the fire from the explosion, I don't know if that would kill them or not. But I don't know. Like I said, there's definitely the chance of, if this continues to be popular on Netflix, which I believe it was fairly popular still even after being on the streaming service for a couple of weeks. But yeah, if this continues being popular, I wouldn't be surprised to see some kind of spin-off or retelling of this story, or even a US adaptation of it. So yeah, that'd be something.
Yeah, if this happens out here in internet land, if whoever decides to go forward and do anything with this movie, like Adam was saying, either a sequel or a reinvention of it, don't butcher it. All right, they set the bar pretty high here. All right, it's a good movie. I was very happy with this.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think we had anybody come in live for the review to chat this time, and that's okay. Next time we'll pick another movie, maybe something a little bit more fresh that's on the tips of the tongues of people, and break that down. But for now, I had a good time watching Blood Red Sky, and I hope that if you're watching this, you did too, and that you actually enjoyed it as much as we did, because I was really refreshed by this, and it felt good to watch it. And I don't watch a lot of feel-good horror movies, and this one had me after the movie. I went to bed a happy guy after I watched this. So
that's something you don't hear a lot. I've never heard those words back to back very much in my life. Feel-good horror movie.
Well, they've tried with some, but sometimes they can just come off as being a little too corny. But do you have anything that you want to say before you take off? Anything you want to plug?
No, we'll be back. This is becoming something that we do regularly. I'm moving again soon, hopefully for the last time ever. But sorry for
Didn't you say that last time?
No, this is it. We're going home. Thankfully, we're going back to where it all started. But yeah,
Nice.
Sorry for the gap. Just a little crazy at work, but we'll try to get this in on the weekends or whenever we have time, and pretty much
Yeah, I'd like to
whenever
squeeze one
Netflix
of these in
dictates.
each week. That'd be nice.
That'll be fun. I'm very down for it. And it's helping me expand. If you guys see, Adam is the connoisseur here. If you're like me, who's dabbled here and there, and you've seen some of the mainstream stuff, this is a lot of fun to kind of get your feet wet and dive into some other things that maybe aren't as mainstream and as popular. But I'm excited because I'm a big horror fan. So we'll pick something good, hopefully again next time, and yeah, we'll see what happens next.
Well, thanks again for checking us out. If you want to watch live, you can hit the buttons on YouTube and on Twitch. You can follow, hit that bell to know when we go live. If you want to watch some of the earlier movie reviews that we did, you can head on over to YouTube. And we have the full catalog there, along with some of my ridiculous game clips that I kind of shoved in there too. So there's a little bit of that on there too. You can filter through that if you like. But yeah, thanks for watching the video. If you like it, maybe come on and hang out next time with us, or share it with a friend, or enjoy. And let's talk about horror movies sometimes, because I love these movies, and I would love to see this kind of horror community grow. So thanks again. And thanks to Mr. Smith for making the time to come on and hop in. Nice to have this happen, and I'm looking forward to doing it again soon. Stay classy. Horror world, I guess.